Well, I'm enjoyed it.
Great. Okay, so welcome to another episode of the Manchester SEO podcast. Today we've got Jonathan Underhill here, who is founder of the JLU Associates. Has a vast experience as a healthcare consultant over 3 decades. And that's a bad way of saying, isn't it?
You're giving my age away, James. Thank you.
I'm so sorry. But thank you for coming in. Tell us a bit about what you're doing at the moment.
Thanks for the introduction. So, I think I class myself as a pharmacist by profession.
Okay.
So, I'm a registered pharmacist. Like all healthcare professionals, pharmacists are regulated by a regulatory body, sure. And I'm still registered, and they have to do certain things to stay on the register.
Yeah.
But yes, I use my experience, 35 years actually, as a pharmacist, to try and help other people around medicines use and how the NHS works, how the health service works, in particular around how we interact with our patients, sure. And the people that we look after as healthcare professionals in the world of medicines and the medicines that people take.
So how did you get into that? Did you pharmacy at university? Or?
Yes. So pharmacy is now a 5-year course, like it is with medicine. When I did it back in 1986, again showing my age here, it was a 3-year course.
Okay.
So how I got into wanting to be a pharmacist, I was about 15 at the time. And I was chatting to a friend of mine at school who was talking about his dad, who was a pharmacist.
Right.
And I said, I've never heard of that. What's that?
Yeah.
Is it a farmer or something?
Yeah.
And then he explained to me, I said, oh, right, a chemist. That we go and that you send your prescription to and you buy stuff from at the chemist. So I got quite interested in that because I was really into chemistry at school. I really liked chemistry and the sciences. And then his dad actually invited me along to his community pharmacy shop,
right,
to work on a Saturday just to have a look around, which was as a 15-year-old, it was a real sort of formative experience for me. Actually.
Yeah,
and I saw his community pharmacy. It was in a former colliery village in Northumberland,
right,
and the people who'd come in, he knew everyone by name, and they all knew him by name,
right.
And I just thought, oh, isn't that nice? He's using his science, but he's also got that sort of social aspect to what he's doing as well. So at that point, I said, right, what do I need to do to be a pharmacist? Found out about that, did my A-levels. At this point, I actually did some more work experience in a hospital, just to find out what that was like. And I thought, actually, I want to be a hospital pharmacist now, not a community pharmacist. So did my 3-year degree, then went to London. You have to do a year it's called a pre-registration year, like an apprenticeship. And it's very much sort of practical based, your pre-registration, where you're working on the wards in the hospital with other pharmacists and reviewing patients' medicines and looking at the medicines that they're on. So that's what got me into pharmacy.
Right. And then how did you navigate through? Because you've been a lecturer and all sorts, haven't you? So.
Yes, I think I've had technical term, I think I've had a squiggly career where I started off in hospital, which is actually, and the way that pharmacy works is you work very on a peripatetic basis, where you rotate through all the different disciplines of pharmacy, manufacturing, dispensing, working on the wards, looking after patients on the wards, answering medicines information queries, even doing the kind of the quality assurance of pharmaceuticals, because it's really important that the quality is there for any medicines that we give to people. So after I worked as a hospital pharmacist, I specialised in medicines information, which is where people would ask you a question about various different things, and you'd go away and you'd look it up and you'd give them the answer to that. And at that point, I started doing quite a bit of writing. We used to do formulary review. So within a hospital, you've got a formulary where the different medicines that are available to people are listed. And in order for a medicine to get onto your formulary, it's got to, you've got to provide evidence for that, evidence that it works, evidence that is better than what else is out there, some information about the side effects of the medicines that it can cause, and maybe something about the cost. So I used to write reviews of the different medicines that would go onto the formulary. And then after that, I actually got a job working for the Department of Health, doing that on a national basis. So a medicine would come onto the market, and then it would be licensed by the MHRA, which is the Medicines Health Regulatory Authority. Medicines are regulated and have to go through certain processes to get onto the market. But after that, there is a decision as to whether it gets to be used on the NHS or not.
Right.
So we would write reviews of these new medicines and different therapeutic areas and send it out to prescribers. So it would be like a bulletin, or we'd do some education materials on that. So that's what took me into that world. For 10 years, I worked at NICE, which is the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence. So NICE was established in 1999 under the when Frank Dobson was the Secretary of State for Health. And NICE was brought in because, as I say, medicines are available and licensed and can be used on the NHS, but there's a question about whether they're a cost-effective use of NHS resources or not. Because you can't just, if a medicine costs thousands and thousands of pounds, then there is a decision to be made there as to in who that can be used. Because obviously there's a cost element to that. So NICE was brought in really to make those difficult decisions on behalf of the government to say, while these medicines are available, we have to prove that they're cost effective as well. So I worked at NICE for 10 years as a consultant clinical advisor there, trying to help NICE make those difficult decisions about what medicines we can use on the NHS or what we can't. I mean, you will have seen NICE in the headlines where there is a new wonder cancer drug that comes out, and it's turned down by NICE because it's too expensive.
Right.
And that does happen. But there's usually really, really good reasons for it, which maybe we can come back to later on. But essentially there's this, how many good quality years of life will this medicine give you, and how much does that cost? Because we can't just give expensive medicines out to everybody, unfortunately. So that's how I got into the position I am now. As I say, I sort of had a bit of a squiggly career with lots and lots of different experiences. I got some really good advice early in my career, and actually I was reading something. There's a guy called Atul Gawande who is a surgeon in Boston, and he's written some great books. One is called Better, and the other book is another one of his books is called Being Mortal. And he worked for the Obama administration over in America, giving sort of healthcare advice on that. Anyway, the thing that caught me that he said was, up until the age of 40 in your career, say yes to things. Okay? And then after the age of 40, say no to things. So if you think about it, up to the age of 40, you don't really know what it is that energizes you work-wise, or indeed what takes energy away from you work-wise. And the only way to find out is to try it. So whenever I talk to younger pharmacists or early career pharmacists, I say to them, just try different things. Have a go. See if you like it. If you don't, try something else. And then by the age of 40, if you don't know by then what it is that energizes you, what you're good at, and what it is that takes energy away from you, you're probably never going to find out. So I quite like that. So say yes to things up to the age of 40, and then start saying no to things.
For me, my personal career, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I kind of fell into a few things and then tried to get out of it. But all that together, even though it wasn't altogether successful, gave me this varied skill set that I need to do with the job now. And so although it wasn't so much of a say yes, it was more scrambling around to do something for someone else to say yes to me. It's a similar thing.
Yeah, it is. So it's interesting. So when I was younger, I had a career plan. I knew I think I knew the direction in which I wanted to go in. But actually that changed quite significantly. At the age of 22, 23, when I was starting out as a pharmacist, if you'd have said by the age of 50, you'll be doing this, I'd have gone, really? I don't see that in my future. But it's funny, just saying yes to things and taking those different experiences. I ended up in the place that I was, and I was very, very happy about that. I look back now and think, yes, I've had quite a successful career that I've enjoyed, and I've ended up doing the things that energise me.
Sure, yeah. What are the main things you're getting involved with at the moment?
So the big challenges around medicines, and certainly what I get involved with is people who are taking lots of medicines, so what we call problematic polypharmacy, where people are taking 20, 25 medicines, and you do what I call medication reviews of people, and you try and find out why they're on different medicines and what the decision making was around how they've ended up on these 25 medicines, and it's not usually clear as to why, and the person isn't clear why they're on the medicine, and actually it's not terribly clear from the notes why they were prescribed it in the first place. I said before, lots of medicines cause side effects. Sometimes what happens is we end up what we call with prescribing cascades, where a medicine is started for a particular condition, causes a side effect, and then another medicine is used to counteract that side effect, etc., etc., etc.
Right.
And you end up on 25 medicines. So I've been doing quite a lot of work looking at, okay, how do we do something about that? How can we help individually, but also how can we help healthcare clinicians who are all trying to do the best job that they can. Nobody in the NHS wakes up in the morning and thinks, well, I'm going to do a really rubbish job today. They all go to work wanting to do the very best for the patients and end up on this cycle of prescribing more and more and more and more. And we need to think about how do we address that. So I've been doing quite a bit of work on that. And that actually comes back to, and one of the things I'm really interested in is how healthcare professionals interact with their patients. And in particular, their consultation skills and their decision, and how their decisions are influenced by their own human behaviours.
It's funny because when we spoke a few weeks back, we discussed that, because I said don't usually go to the doctors for anything because I'm luckily so far been fairly healthy. But I went for the first time in a while, and the doctor said to me, so what do you want out of this consultation? I'm like, well, to feel a little bit better, surely. But actually, I thought that's a really interesting question in the way you deal with people and what they want, and what their expectations are.
It's a key question. I'd say that's actually a really, really good start to the consultation, doing that, rather than just saying, well, I think I've assumed what you're here for, James. Therefore, if we do this, you'll be happy, won't you? Much better to start with that. Right, what is it what are you here for today? What is it that really matters to you? That's the key question, finding out what matters to the individual person. Because that then determines the rest of your consultation. If you focus on what that person's told you about what matters to them, and you focus on that, not what matters to you and what you think matters to them, but what actually does matter to them, it changes the dynamic completely.
But if I'd gone there assuming that I just needed some antibiotics and saying I want that, which I would never say, because
no.
But I know a lot of people that just say, I just need some antibiotics to go to doctors and get some. I'm like, well.
and we make assumptions based on how people look, what we think people are here for. And if your assumption is this person's coming because they want an antibiotic, then that changes the dynamic of the consultation, doesn't it? Whereas if you come in with an open mind saying, how can I help you today?
Yeah.
What is it you're looking for from this? And it might be that you're just looking for some reassurance to say, actually, yes, you probably have got an infection. It's probably a virus. Antibiotics aren't going to help, and it will get better on its own without you needing to take an antibiotic. That can be actually a really, really positive consultation as well.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because it probably affects how the patient heals as well and gets better, because if they believe they've got something or have had advice that will help, then the brain has powers to heal as well, doesn't it? Or help with whatever's going on.
It does. I mean, there's this. So the placebo effect is well described in the medical literature as being so. A placebo would be a dummy tablet where there's no active ingredient in it. There's no pharmaceutically active ingredient in there. But if the person believes it's something that's going to help them and they take it, they're actually more likely to achieve a benefit from that. So, and again, it especially if there is a mental health component to an illness, and that doesn't just mean things like depression or schizophrenia. Things like pain, experiences of pain, has got a sort of a mental component to it as well. Okay. So if you believe something's going to work, then actually it may well work for you because of that psychological impact that has on your body.
Yeah. And so you get involved with the coaching, the training, with GPs and things like that?
Yeah. So GPs, but also pharmacists as well. So pharmacists can prescribe medicines now as part of the, if you do it either an additional course or the newly qualified pharmacists coming out now will be able to prescribe just the same as doctors can. So I do lots of work with different healthcare professionals looking at how much they understand about medicines and in particular how they use those in their interactions with others. Yeah. So some of the teaching I do is for GP registrars. So to be a GP, you have to do your 5-year medical degree, then you do your 2-year pre-registration foundation year, and then you specialise as a GP, and then you have to take an exam after that to be a GP. So I've been doing some work with some GPs trying to help them pass their exam, hopefully first time. But for those people who haven't passed first time, we do some work with them to try and find out what went wrong in the exam and how we can help them improve in the future. And it's interesting as well, James, because you talk to people, some of the GPs who haven't passed their exam, and some of the basic things that they learned when they were doing the A levels, they've forgotten how to go about passing exams. How do you stay up to date in an efficient way? And people just have quite a haphazard approach to how they go about staying up to date. We're actually giving people a little bit of structure and saying to people, have you thought about doing this? Have you thought about doing that? Where do you get your sources of information and evidence from? Is it just that you ask someone who you trust, or do you go to the trusted sources of evidence and information? And it's quite remarkable, really, sometimes how some people just have forgotten how important that approach is to staying up to date.
I mean, it's clear to see that the style of consultations with pharmacists and doctors has changed over the last 20, 30 years, in my experience. Clearly, that's a good thing.
Well, I think so. I mean, I would say there's still a way to go, but I think you're right that even just a sense of involvement from patients, people are much more likely to be involved in the decisions about them with regard to healthcare than they were in the past. I mean, I think that's the case with not just within healthcare, but across all industries and all walks of life. People want to be involved in decisions about them, rather than just that's sometimes what was quite a paternalistic approach to healthcare, where you go and see the doctor decides what's best for you, and off you go. That's not how it works anymore.
Same in business, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, people want to make an educated decision or understand what's happening in the business, and sometimes it's an outsider that gives you that insight, and especially in consultations or in a consultant in any industry. It's a lot of the time it's all about solutions, and that a lot of that comes from getting information out of people. And then how you structure that and how you deliver it back to people.
I think solutions is a really interesting word. If I can just pick up on that. I think in my experience of consultancies coming into healthcare settings has been mixed, let's say.
Right.
And I think one of the fundamental issues here is that healthcare is what we call a complex problem rather than a complicated problem.
Right.
So there's a guy called Paul Plessig who's written this around complexity theory and how that works within healthcare settings. Lots of consultants will come into healthcare and go, right, if you just do this, this, and this, here's the solution, it'll fix the problem. But because healthcare is a complex problem, you can't fix it. So here's an analogy, okay? So imagine you are, and we're putting a person on the moon, okay? And we've done that, even if you kind of, if you don't believe the conspiracy theories, we actually have put several people on the moon in the past. So that's an example of a highly complicated problem. But if you do all the engineering correctly, you do the tests, you run everything to sort of 10 significant figures in terms of the probability that it's going to work, press all the buttons in the right order, you can put a person on the moon. Okay, and you can repeat that and do it every time. An example of a complex problem would be bringing up a child. So imagine you've got a child, here's the standard operating procedure for how you bring up a child, or here's the guideline for how you bring up a child, and you follow it to the nth degree. Does your child grow up to be the same as the other person's child who's done exactly the same thing? No, it doesn't. No. Because of the hundreds of thousands of human-to-human interactions that child experiences on a daily basis. And healthcare is very similar, because it's all about people working with other people. And the important thing about complex problems is you can't fix them. So consultants coming in, I have people from the military coming into healthcare thinking, right, let's get this sorted out. If we just do this, and this in this order, and it just doesn't work, because you can't fix the health service. What you can do is make things a little bit better by doing things in isolation and improving certain processes, improving people's networks, how well supported they are. Something around the continuity of care is really important within healthcare. So seeing the same clinician on a regular basis really helps. Clearly having enough resources to be able to run the health service is really important. Having that multifaceted approach to support implementation is really important. But none of those things on their own will fix the problem of the NHS or the health service. And I think what I would say to businesses, if they are coming to work in the health service, have a read about complexity theory and just be aware that having a simple solution to something isn't going to work. Because if there was a simple solution to this, we'd have done that 30 years ago.
I mean, it is quite interesting. I was brought to a place where my kind of skill was getting people to do things that they weren't probably supposed to be doing, but needed to be done to get things finished and completed, or to get information for clients. I was the main contact between the development team and the business and everyone within a software company and the client. And clients were huge multi-billion pound companies that were upset. But it was like, so really there is a solution, but there's various different ways of getting to it. And soft skills and being able to influence people and make them feel like they're being heard as well, which is something that wasn't happening, which was anyone in Europe. I was amazed actually how anyone in general, people are very reasonable if you give them the full information. If you hide away from it, then they get angry and get annoyed because they've not heard anything and they don't understand the problem. And so I suppose within healthcare and in business, it's a similar thing. If you can communicate properly and you have those different skill sets, it does help with that, the more complex situations.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think most healthcare professionals, I'm not worried about their technical skills in terms of their knowledge.
Yeah.
If it's a surgeon, how good they are at performing surgery. I think where the real improvements can be made are, as you say, those so-called softer skills. I don't like the term softer skills because it almost makes them feel as if they're not as important as the technical skills. But they're really, communication is so important for most people in most walks of life. Unless you're working on your own and you don't, and you're doing a really highly technical thing, then communication might not be as important. But it's so important for healthcare professionals to be good at that. I'm also a big fan of. There's a lady called Kim Scott who talks about radical candor. I don't know if you've heard of radical candor. So whenever you're having an interaction with a person, whether it's a one-to-one, whether you're doing a coaching session, whether you're giving somebody feedback, or actually just how you interact with people on a daily basis. What radical candor involves is challenging directly, but also caring personally about the person as well. So if you just challenge directly on its own, then that's actually quite obnoxious and not very nice for the person. So, for example, if your fly was undone today, and I'd go, "Well, hey, look, James's fly's undone." Great. That's you're
Suddenly become very self-conscious.
Yes, you're pointing it out to you, but not in a very nice way. No. Whereas if I just ignored it, and didn't challenge it, then that what Kim Scott calls ruinous empathy, where you're not actually challenging it. Doing the two together gives you what she calls radical candor. Challenge directly, but also care personally. Don't do one without the other. And I use that all the time when I'm having feedback sessions with people on a one-to-one basis. It's like you can't just ignore where there is an improvement, but you have to do it in an empathetic way as well.
Yeah. Interesting. What else are you involved with?
So I mentioned keeping up to date, didn't I? And I think that's something that's increasingly difficult for people in every walk of life, not just within as healthcare professionals. So how do you go about doing that in your busy day? How do you sort out the stuff that's important from the stuff that you can actually just ignore? And there's obviously a whole industry that's built on this with the news, for example, where there's fact-finding in the news and fact-checking in the news and fake news and all that kind of stuff. So one of the things I found really useful in my in my career about 15 years ago, there was two actually friends of mine now, were colleagues at the time, Dave Slawson and Alan Shaughnessy, who are Dave's a doctor in America and Alan's a pharmacist in America, and they came up with this equation. Now, I love an equation. I mentioned I love science when I was at school. But this is what they call the usefulness equation for information and evidence. So the usefulness of any piece of information is a product of its relevance, so how important it is to you as an individual, multiplied by its validity, so how likely it is to be true, divided by the amount of time it takes you to get that piece of information. So...
Interesting,
isn't it? So if the validity is 0, doesn't matter how valid it is, or if it's really easy for you to get it, it's not going to be useful to you. And likewise, if it takes you ages and ages and ages to find out whether it's true or not, then that's not going to be very useful to you either, because you want the information now, don't you? So you can see how things like social media, it's very easy for that to be, because the effort required to get that information is quite low. So you just go to social media and say, give me an answer to this question, please. But what about the validity of that? Where's that come from? Where's the provenance of that information from? Is it a blogger in North Carolina who's come up with this? Or is it a well-respected institution that's done loads and loads of work and done a systematic review and analysed all the evidence and come up with with some guidance or a recommendation here? And it's finding that balance between I think that's really helpful for people to think about, where do you get your information from?
And what's that called?
It's just the usefulness equation.
So that's really interesting, because there was a lot of things you were saying there that relates to SEO and websites. You know, it's like, is what you're putting down there useful? You're displaying your expertise. How many clicks does it take to get to that core information? How long does it take? You know, is there any other website of note or institution referencing it, and that boosts you up? And
yes.
You know, so I wouldn't be surprised if that's a core piece of the algorithm with Google and other search engines.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I've not. It's interesting. I've looked to see whether or not that's been used explicitly, and I've not seen it. But maybe it's just being used implicitly, and people just do that sort of thing.
It's called different things in different areas. You know, it's all part of different parts of the SEO world. But it made perfect sense when you're talking about how useful is your website? Why should it be indexed? Why should any of the pages be indexed? Is anyone reading it?
Indeed.
And who's doing that? Where are they coming from?
Yeah.
It's really important. Actually, it's key to everything.
It is. And the other aspect here as well, for healthcare professionals, certainly for clinicians who are seeing patients on a daily basis, you've probably got about an hour a week to stay up to date. Maybe 2 hours if you're lucky. So how do you use that, what we call the golden hour a week? And if you just read things haphazardly and at random, then that's probably not going to be the best for you staying up to date in an efficient way. So there's 3 aspects that we talk about. There's, you have a hunting tool. Right. So if you get stuck, where do you go to find the best answer as quickly and as efficiently as possible? The other 2 elements you need is, because we make decisions based on what's in our heads, we don't like to go away and look things up. I'm a big fan of Daniel Kahneman's work, where he talks about human beings being cognitive misers. Okay. So we try and do things as efficiently as possible. So thinking is to humans as swimming is to cats. So cats can swim, they just don't like doing it. Humans can think, we just don't like doing it. Right. So to work with that then, how do you make sure that what's in your brain is up to date with the latest evidence? So you have it, what we call sort of like a hot sinking approach. So every 6 months you check to see that your current thinking is in line with the best evidence. And as I said, trusted sources, good provenance of the sources. Is what I'm doing still in line with that. And the last element is having something that alerts you maybe once a week to new stuff in your field. So again, you can use that in other industries as well. Have you got, because there's loads of different tools out there where you can have news sent to you from different sources that's relevant to your own work. So hunting, foraging and hot sinking is the other thing that we teach people about how to stay up to date.
And also the trusted places to get information from and keep up to date, their take can change as well quite dramatically over time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting what you were saying before about surrounding yourself with like-minded people, which can be a really positive thing, but also there's that sort of role of advocacy there as well. What you don't want to do is surround yourself and live in an echo chamber where you're just hearing views that are similar to you. I actually actively seek out people in social media who have a different view to me and listen to them. And I usually disagree with them, and I come up with reasons why I don't agree. But it's making me think about that. It's not just making me lapse into that sort of recognising the pattern of other like-minded people telling me the same thing that I want to hear. Challenge yourself as well, that's the other thing.
I worked in a business where it's 2 brothers, and me and one brother, we were the ideas guys, and we go, let's do this, let's do that, and then the other one was no. And so what he did with that, which was really good, he kept us all under control. What we were doing or spending or talking about or venturing to. But you then had to go back to the table with an extra level of this is why. And so like you say, like having someone to challenge is
Absolutely.
are you thinking?
Yes. I mean, the best example I can remember from history on that is John F. Kennedy. So this is going back to the 1960s, where they had the Bay of Pigs crisis, where everyone just agreed with him. And afterwards he said, that can't happen again. So he got his brother Bobby to come in and argue with him about everything he said, to act as an advocate. And as a result of that, they had the Cuban Missile Crisis that was avoided because of that. And you wonder whether or not politicians and indeed boards are set up with somebody whose job it is to give the other side of the other point of view. I mean, I worry lots about my politicians where people are just surrounded by people who say yes, Donald, yes, Keir. And you don't want that. You want someone who can give you a good reason to argue against you. And that would be the same in business, I would think, as well. Surround yourself with people who you trust, but also have someone who can give you a different point of view and maybe argue with you, just to challenge you from time to time as well.
I suppose that's the role of the opposition. And sometimes I feel like they do just argue the toss sometimes for the hell of it.
Yes.
Whereas perhaps if then an agreement with something becomes more powerful then, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed.
Interesting. What are the main challenges at the moment, do you think, in healthcare?
In healthcare. We're going through a period of reflection at the minute in the NHS. We're expecting the new 10-year plan to come out in the next couple of weeks, and that will be all over the news when it comes out. Quite what that's going to say, I don't know, but I suspect it'll be a move towards getting people out of hospital and being seen in other settings. Access to other settings is going to be really, really important. I think there's a role for my profession and particularly community pharmacists within that, because they're really accessible and fairly easy to get to. You can't get to see your GP very easily, but you can go and see your community pharmacist.
Yeah, I've seen that recently. They've got little rooms where you can ask them questions.
Exactly. So I think there's that. There's also the use of technology. I think there's a real challenge with the use of machine learning and AI in healthcare. I think it's been put into the too scary box at the moment because people don't really understand how it can work really, really well. But there is some good evidence emerging that using AI sensibly in combination with a human can actually improve outcomes for people. So a computer, because of our bounded rationality in our heads as human beings, we can never know everything, whereas a computer knows much more stuff than we do as human beings. The question is, how do human beings use that in order to take that into the personal situation where we find out what matters most to the person? Here's the best evidence that we have for this that's been translated to me by either machine learning or through AI. How can we take that into the consultation here? So I think there's a big challenge there about how we use that. And the other thing I think is, and there's lots of debate about how much disease can we prevent. So do we start as early as possible and try to prevent disease by encouraging people to change their lifestyle, perhaps, or the food industry, or the circumstances in which they live? If you grow up in poverty, you end up having really, really poor health outcomes later on. What I worry about is that might push people to use medicines earlier and earlier and earlier in people's life. People we've got this thing called pre-diabetes now, where you haven't quite got type 2 diabetes, but you're probably going to have it in 5 years' time. So do you take a medicine to prevent you developing diabetes, or do you change your lifestyle to do that? So I think that's a real challenge there as well. I think the other big challenge that I can't really get my head around is gene therapies.
Okay.
So things like diabetes, there are therapies being developed now where we can alter your genetics so that we cure you from having type 1 diabetes, so you don't require insulin anymore. It's cured.
Wow.
and certain cancers that we haven't been able to treat before, you can actually cure them.
Okay.
The problem with these gene therapies, James, is that there are hundreds of thousands of pounds per person.
Right.
So that gives a real challenge to the health system, because how do you decide who gets it? You can't afford to give it out to everyone.
Yeah.
So so that's a real challenge. But on a personal basis, if it was you, then clearly I'd want you to have it. Or if it was me, or my mum, or my sister, or my wife, or whoever, my best friend, you'd want them to have it. But if it's some guy down the road who I don't know, then I'm not really bothered about him having it or not, unless you take that societal approach to things, which you have to do, I think, for healthcare.
Do you think there's a lot of wastage money-wise in healthcare?
Yes, I mean, I think there's wastage everywhere. There's the wastage within medicines. I talked before about someone being on 25 medicines. Now, they're prescribed 25 medicines, but do they take 25 medicines a day? And there's actually been some work where you ask people in a safe space to say, how many of these medicines do you actually take? And they say, well, actually, I only take about 8 of them. The rest, I don't want to tell the doctor who's prescribed them for me that I don't take them, because that might upset them. So they just keep getting, and you see people with cupboards full of medicines that are going to waste. I also think there's a lot of what's called failure demand in the health service, where you do something quickly, maybe not as effectively as you could if you spent a bit more time doing it, and that creates more work down the line for health for the health service. So, for example, sometimes if someone's got depression and they're presented primary care with depression, it's a lot easier to prescribe an antidepressant medicine than it is to refer someone for cognitive behavioural therapy, because we don't have enough therapists within the health service. So the failure demand is the person takes antidepressant, develops side effects from the antidepressant, and then takes a whole lot of other medicines to try and treat that. Where actually, if we'd invested some time in giving that person CBT, then that actually would have been a better outcome for them. So failure demand's a really big thing within the health service.
I was watching a program the other day, and it was talking about health in Japan, how the healthy society in general, and what was seen as a major cause was that there was a person in every school who it was their job to teach them how to cook and prepare food and fresh food without any chemicals, and they were paid. They're probably the highest paid person in the school, and this is all done throughout the country as a way of preserving health in the country. And sometimes, I mean, I know friends that don't know how to boil an egg or look after themselves. So come on, sometimes I think there's an onus really on the human or society to actually teach these things.
Definitely, completely agree. And again, it's that sort of like, it comes back to failure demand. Not doing that in schools then causes people to not understand how food works, how their bodies work, how important it is to stay fit and healthy. And then by the age of 35 or whatever, they've got type 2 diabetes or hypertension and it needs treating.
So perhaps putting more money into that part of education would save money in the future with the NHS. And I was thinking it's all short-termism because it's obviously driven by politics all the time.
Yeah, I mean, Sir Michael Marmot did a review 10 years ago saying exactly that. If you want to really improve the health of the nation, we shouldn't be investing in expensive pharmaceuticals. We should be investing in tackling child poverty, teaching people how to stay healthy, actually making sure that healthy foods cost less than unhealthy foods, all those sorts of things. It can make a real difference. But unfortunately, the Marmot review was shelved. Again, put into the too difficult box because it requires, as you say, a societal change for how we do this.
So you mentioned AI before.
Yes.
I think we've spoken about it in every single industry or a podcast episode we've done. I was going to ask you what's been the influence in healthcare, but that's a wide range, isn't it? I'd heard about it being used to early identify skin cancers and help with diagnosis, or maybe monitoring patients after they've had cancer care and giving them all clear, and they can just part of the post care thing, which is not the right terminology, but I'll stop talking now. What's your take on it?
So I think you're right. There's clear potential for the use of machine learning and AI in healthcare. Computers are really, really good at processing large volumes of data and making sense of them, drawing themes from them, thinking about the strengths and weaknesses of the different data. Much better than we are as human beings, again, because of our bounded rationality. We can only take in so much information and then remember it. I mean, I do an exercise with people where I say, here's a list of 20 words. Read them once, and then ask them to write down how many words they've got. They can remember 10 seconds later. Most people can do 5 or 6 words from that list of 20. A computer would be able to remember 20 easily. No problem.
Data in, data out.
Data in, data out. That's what computers are really, really good at. It's the thinking bit that I think is, and it may well be in 5-10 years' time, maybe shorter than that, computers do start thinking. And we end up with the Terminator sort of scenario where we've got the machines take over. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think what we need to find out is how can we use machines, how can we use AI in combination with humans, and respect, if you like, the ability of computers to know more than we do. Because you mentioned skin cancer, pattern recognition. Computers are really, really good at pattern recognition and taking in loads and loads of data points from different points, from different scenarios, and putting the pattern together and say, actually, that looks like a basal cell carcinoma. Whereas you ask human beings, is that a basal cell carcinoma from a picture? And they'll go, yeah, it might be. And you'll get disagreement. You get 100 doctors and ask if it's a basal cell carcinoma or not, and they'll disagree. Whereas a computer will usually agree more often than not. So I think there's definitely something about that. I think there's also something about sort of remote technology here, where you can't access a human being as easily as possible, but you can access a computer who can maybe triage you to see whether or not you've got something that's a red flag from the symptoms you're describing, and say, actually, you need to go and see a doctor, you need to go and see a person here, or can safely reassure and say, actually, you'd be fine to go and self-care for this because there's nothing to worry about. So I think there's definitely something there around the use of AI in those sorts of scenarios.
The use of technology in general, isn't it, I suppose, can help with. I've got a client that do helping with hospitals and doctors around the country with patient management. They can come in, they can put the name in, it tells them where to go. Sign into it. Sometimes you've got the elderly that they can't type in or they can't see properly, or and you do need that human interaction to give that extra level of care and guidance.
Provided you've got good communication skills and good listening skills. Actually, one of my former colleagues, David Haslam, came up with this thing about consultation skills. He said you just need 4 things to be good at consultation. You need to shut up, listen, because if you can't listen if you're still talking. You need to know something about the situation, not everything, know something, and you need to show empathy. You need to care. And I think I don't see enough of that around. I'm sure you get this all the time, where you're having a conversation with someone and they'll interrupt you. And you just think, why don't you just listen to what I've got to say and then come back with one? It's like a basic human skill that we've forgotten, because it's like we need to shout over people so that we're heard here.
There's we had Pete Ackley on a few. It was last month actually, and he talks a lot about leadership and culture, and he said, being a good coach or leader is all about, well, it's not about you, but also it's all about you. So everything is about the other person, but then it's how you communicate to them about what they're doing, what the performance is, what the future is, everything, skill sets.
Yes.
And that.
Using radical candor to feed back to people as well.
Yeah. All the same things with different.
They are. Well, that's right. I mean, there's no such thing as original thought anymore. It's all recycled. But sometimes you find something, you go, I quite like that.
Yeah.
That kind of resonates with me.
Yeah. And I was listening to someone else talk about AI and use of it within business. I don't know whether it relates to the healthcare sector, but really it says, understand that your staff are going to be using AI in what they do, and you cannot stop that. So the important thing for us as a business owner or someone senior is to take ownership of that and understand what can be used and why and how, what legal aspects you've got to be aware of, misinformation you might have to be aware of, and how you can actually use it to improve what you do and the experience for your clients or patients or whatever.
I mean, the thing that worries me a little bit about AI is that it can look on the surface to be really, really convincing. But it's all about, it's rubbish in, rubbish out, isn't it? If your sources that you're drawing from aren't particularly good quality sources, and the provenance of that information is not high, sufficiently high, then even if it looks really good presentationally, it can lull you into a false sense of security or of trust. And I think if we are going to use AI, people need to be taught about, right, where's the information come from? Don't just look at the surface. Find out what the original source was for this, and then use the usefulness equation to sort of like assess whether this is likely to be true or not. Because if the validity is low, the usefulness of the information is going to be low as well, even if it looks really pretty and looks really convincing.
We have a thing at the moment. I say it's me. And I talk about it a lot. And like, if you did an experiment on social media, so let's talk about LinkedIn, and you'll do a post that looks really good, but is clearly generated by AI, and one that doesn't look quite as well put together, but looks more human in the way it's presented. You tend to subconsciously not read the AI one, but actually read and interact and engage more with the human-generated one. And you'll see that if you did a test, you'll see that people do engage more with yours. And that's quite interesting when it comes to, so humans can identify it quite clearly at the moment. Search engines can identify it. I mean, they're part of the problem as well, but there's different reasons for that. But then the user-generated signals that you'll get when someone is actually on your website and looking at a thing is they'll interact or they'll read more of something that is clearly more human-generated than something that is clearly generated by something else and perhaps isn't adding anything new to the conversation around that topic, or has anything new to say about it, or so it's all about. I've kind of lost my train of thought, but going back to what you were talking about, really, in terms of if you're providing something that's AI generated, perhaps that's the same in healthcare as well. If I'm talking to an AI doctor, am I going to take notice of something rather than someone that can look me in the eye and talk to me in a human way?
Interesting. I'd not heard that before, but it kind of, again, makes intuitive sense. That it goes back to that thing. Yeah, we like, most of us like human-to-human contact, aren't we? And we thrive on that.
Yeah.
Not everyone, but most people do. And I think if we got to a world where it's like all of our interactions were with a computer or with other people via a computer, I don't think that would be a particularly rich experience for us. Yeah, and I think it goes back to what you were saying before. It's like, where's the value added here with that? How can you add value to that? How can you add value to what the AI generated LinkedIn post has done? So I would have thought it would save you a whole lot of time getting AI to do the nuts and bolts of it, but then read it yourself and put it into your own words and maybe add a bit of the human factors to that. I would have thought that would be that. That's how I use AI and ChatGPT and others. I'll take, because it's really good at doing sort of analysis of the data. But then I'll interpret it myself and say, well, I'm going to add that to it, and that to it, and that to it, and make that point. And I think that's the same in healthcare as well, as using it in combination with a human. That's where the real value is being seen.
So future, what does that look like? That's the big question.
As Niels Bohr said, I can predict anything apart from the future. And I think that's right. Who knows what's around the corner? Who knows how quickly technology is going to advance? I think I've said I do think there are some challenges for healthcare in the future. I think the gene therapies are going to be a real challenge for people in terms of how we use them. I think, as we said, the use of AI in consultations is going to become much more routine, I think, than it is now. And I do hope there is something around us having a good look at prevention. True prevention, starting, like you mentioned, with the Japanese model, where we start getting back to almost the fundamentals of, at school, where we all used to do home economics at school, where we were taught about the different values of food and how you go about, as you said, boiling an egg. Those key skills. So I do hope there's something in the future that we have a little bit of a reset and go back to that. Because technology is great and I love it. I'm a big fan of technology, but I find myself more and more having to be purposeful about the time that I spend with other people and doing the things that, as I said, that energize me. Not just that are quite easy to do. And it's very easy to fall into bad habits and just get lazy about what you do. And sometimes you do need to make an effort to have that interaction with people, that's human interaction with people.
And you host a podcast as well.
I do, yes. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to plug it, James.
What's it called?
So it's called Talking Meds. Okay. So it's a bit of a play on kind of talking heads. But Talking Meds. And I work for, one of my clients is an organisation called PrescQIPP. And they're a community interest company funded by the NHS. And we provide support for medicines teams. Across the NHS on various things. And one of the things that they asked me to do was to host a podcast. So it goes out every fortnight. It's me interviewing somebody interesting. And my job is just to ask questions and to sit back and let them talk and tell me about what they're doing and what the particular challenges are for them. And I've had some great guests on there who have just, you just let the magic happen and some great stuff comes out there. I have to say, it is probably quite pharmacy focused and medicines focused, can get quite technical sometimes, but there's always, you've listened to it, there's usually enough in there for a general audience as well. So yeah.
I mean, I didn't find anything
Okay, good.
too difficult with it. It was definitely an interesting message.
I think as pharmacists are always very conscious that we've become very, very technical when we're talking to other pharmacists or other doctors, and I have to try really hard not to get too technical.
And what do you do outside of work and things like that?
Yeah, so
No, you're a Newcastle fan.
I am a Newcastle fan. It's been a amazing season for us. I was very lucky to be at Wembley for the cup final.
Yeah.
That was a weird thing, James. I was with my best mate, who I've known since I was 3.
Yeah.
And our dads both used to take us to the football, and both our dads are dead.
Yeah,
His dad died about 2 years ago. And obviously we start crying, grown men crying. And there's a guy next to me who's 60-year-old with his son, and he's crying. And we're hugging each other. And I'm saying to him, I've just spent probably the best two hours of my life in your company, and I'll never meet you again. And it's just weird, that sort of thing. So I do get very passionate about football. I'm very passionate about music. I kind of sing in 2 bands. One is a soul band. We do covers of kind of the Commitments and stuff like that. And that's quite interesting because there's lots of moving parts to a soul band with there's like a tenor sax, alto sax, trombone, trumpet, keyboards, drums, bass, guitar, 4 singers. So one thing goes wrong. It's and the other band I sing with is a kind of a 4-piece indie cover band. Right. So guitar, bass, drum, and vocals, and that's it. And that's very different. Kind of very stripped back. But both of them give me an enormous pleasure. I don't see me headlining Glastonbury anytime soon, but it's not about that. It's about just having a good time, and it's one of those things that just brings you joy. And again, it's about finding those things in your life that bring you joy. I love my dog. I've got a bull terrier. Go out walking with him. My family are really important to me. I've got a son and daughter who are very, very successful. Right. My son's 29, my daughter's 26, and they've both got their own lives, and that's all you want as a parent, isn't it? That they're independent and fully functioning and reasonable human beings.
That's
I've done okay here. But
mine's my boy's 7, and I'm just obsessed with if it's your mummy, grandma, or your teacher, or me, please and thank you. They're important.
I know. It is important.
If you're a nice person, you get more out of people.
Again, but I have to say, both of my children are as I said, reasonable human beings with, I think, have good sort of moral structures in them. Please and thank you. If there was an older person on a train standing, my children would get up and give them the seat. Or there was a pregnant lady or whatever. And not everyone's like that, James, and I think that's so important. And so that's the way I was brought up, and that's certainly the way that my children have been brought up. So.
Amazing. Is there anything we've not covered that you wanted to talk about?
I don't think so. It's been fascinating. It's interesting. We talked before, didn't we? So I'm used to hosting a podcast, but the camera's not on with a podcast because it's just audio only. It's like you keep looking at the camera, but no. And also being interviewed is very different and more sort of less comfortable than actually being the host. I think. However, it was basically just talking about me. Which is kind of my specialist subject. Most people's specialist subject is themselves. So that was fine. But no, I really enjoyed that. It's been a really useful conversation. I hope viewers or listeners find it helpful as well. Hopefully there's something in there that makes them think about. Next time I have an interaction with my healthcare professional, I'm going to make sure that they find out what matters to me. I'm going to look at their consultation skills. I'm going to make sure that they're truly listening to me. And also for people perhaps who are looking to work within the healthcare sector. I think the other important thing is that it's a complex environment. You might think you can come in and fix things. Trust me, you won't be able to fix things. You might be able to make things a little bit better, but be aware that this is a complex structure with healthcare professionals who usually know what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's about working with them on that to make sure that they're doing the best that they can.
So there was one more thing that I read yesterday.
Oh yeah,
and it's in sport. So randomly years ago, I went to see Tommy Turner, and he's an Irish comedian.
Yeah.
He started talking about I think there'd been an Irish swimmer that tested positive for drugs and all that, and he said you should have the Drugs Olympics, which is sponsored by pharmaceutical companies and stuff like that, and you could throw the javelin 200 meters and stuff like that, and see what it was on the BBC website yesterday. There is like a games out there.
There is,
for people
yes.
And now
the enhanced games, I think.
enhanced games. That's it. Yeah, and it might be in the IOC or someone that is saying, well, if you've ever competed in that, you can't compete in the normal one, even if you're off it because of whatever. I thought I should ask Jonathan about that tomorrow. Your thoughts on an enhanced games. Part of me quite likes it. You've got to be careful. Yeah.
It's interesting. So when I was doing my degree back in 1989, my thesis was on the use of drugs in sport. Now, you didn't know that.
No, I didn't know that.
And you've asked me about that. But remember, this is 35 years ago, so I don't really remember that much about it.
Well, Ben Johnson time, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was. It was the Seoul Olympics, 1988. I think that's probably what made me
most
do it.
people were on in that race.
Well, and that's the thing. I'm also really into cycling as well, and obviously cycling is
yeah.
And I think there's a massive moral debate here around this because, and there's been a debate about different shoes that have been manufactured and whether they're legal or not to use. And there's always going to be people seeking a competitive advantage by whatever means they can.
Yeah.
Whether it's technology, whether it's the use of shoes, whether it's the use of specialized training techniques, whether it's nutrition, all the rest of it. The question is then, where's the line? Where do you draw that line?
Yeah.
And I think it's a really, really difficult job for the IOC and WADA, the kind of the drug testing people, to find, because you've got people who've got naturally high levels of testosterone. Okay, whether it's men or women, and that will give you a competitive advantage.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean to say they've taken testosterone.
No.
They might just have naturally more testosterone than someone else. But it is really difficult. In terms of how I can see how an enhanced games might be interesting from a sort of a spectator point of view. And it would be quite intriguing to see exactly how much the performance was increased through using medicines. I suspect it's not as big as we think it is,
Well, I was amazed. Did you watch the Icarus?
Yes.
So the guy goes on a actual doping program and a cyclist, and it took a while for him to increase times and things like that. It was fascinating to see. But obviously, used properly and everything else.
But having said that, and the marginal gains thing, even 1% improvement is the difference between winning and losing.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
So you can see why people would want to take any advantage they can.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, obviously the worry is, and the reason that this was brought in the first place was because there was a cyclist in the 1960s, Bobby Simpson, who was taking amphetamines and died in the Tour de France. And it all came to headlines as a result of that. So there is a safety element here.
Yeah.
So you can say, well, just let people do what they want and they can use anabolic steroids and all the rest of it. But the consequences of using that can be dire for you in later life. And you do things when you're 21, 22, 23 because you think you're invincible.
Yeah.
And then when you get to 50 and the repercussions of that are manifest in you because you can't function, then do we have a responsibility as a society to protect people from that? Or do we just say to people, oh, if you're stupid enough to do that, off you go?
Jeremy Clarkson, who everyone knows,
Yes.
talked about this recently because he said, I can't drink, I can't smoke, I can't do anything, I can't eat a sausage, I can't do anything that I love doing anymore because I took it too far when I was single. I would be out all night, I smoke heavily, a couple of bottles of wine a day, plus beer or whatever it was, and it was quite interesting to hear him say that, you know, I wish I'd taken it a bit more easy, so I could still do it now.
It is interesting. So I think, Clarkson's one of those sort of Marmite people, isn't he? But people do listen to him, and I read that his article in the Times as well, and I thought that was actually quite reflective of and quite mature of him to think that. Of course, the other aspect of the argument is the Woody Allen approach is where you give up all the things you enjoy in life, so you can spend an extra 6 months at the end of your life in a nursing home.
Yeah.
No, I'd much rather enjoy my life, and then, as everyone wants, right, I just want to die now, please, without any suffering or anything like that when I get to a certain age. And of course, that's what we all wish for and hope for, but that's very rarely the case.
Amazing. Well, I think mentioning Clarkson and Woody Allen at the end of a podcast is a great way to finish.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for coming in. It's been really interesting.
Brilliant. Thanks for asking me, James. Cheers.
Nice.